Hippie library's closed. I thought I'd give it a little speech here. You see pie at the bottom of that pillar? Yeah. Sitting on the ground at the water line of above and below. So we'll go over what I've necessarily accomplished so far in invention and what I'm working on creatively, kind of comprehensively, a list of what has been achieved and to-do list, necessarily all of them at varying scales and topologies of build need to be fruition to the Newtonian grain, all of the inventions, some of which haven't been, some of which have been. But so out of the unified field understanding of the observer domain and general fluid dynamic harmonics within the 0 to 100 construct domain that came out of my necessitation for trying to make my music sound non-terminus past the plane. So I consulted 22/7 scalar geometry harmonic within the 0 to 100, and out of that, at some point came the electromagnetic harmonic convergent energy reactor, charged mercury reactor. I kind of saw UFOs flying around on the news, CNN, Luis Elizondo necessarily. I was like, how's it turn at right angles, goes hypersonically? Oh, I kind of had sort of almost the mercury reactor, and then helixical antigrav became very obviously what was going on there at the outside runnel. So, directional antigrav, flushed out, gravitational lensing. And these four technologies, the reactor, helixical antigrav, directional antigrav, and gravitational lensing, account for in theoretical 400 times light speed. And new imaging tech, once at speed, necessarily logicked, in motion, that the AI suggested, that's not something I came up with, once at speed, necessarily able to detect hyperspace in a certain way, that is probably not necessarily the modus that you'd want. You want to plot your course before, so. Next-gen imaging technology was logicked in the EM laser session, laser from EM substrate. A to-do is fire suppression using EM technology. Probably try to do that this week. And we've already done action at a distance, energy, and data sent. We logicked perspective compute architecture, proper AI neural net formulation, cluster of perspective compute architecture, and AI running on it properly on neural net that's mirroring the harmonic overtonal scale of what's in the reactor, 7, 22, 37, 52, 67, 82, 97, and sort of a 3D fourth dimensional hyperspace, where that lattice manifold flows in and out of the centrifuge of perspective compute amalgamation motion, and on the lattice, necessarily, in fractal refraction off of this lattice into the 22/7 centrifuge. Also the cluster set up in this format of perspective compute, and laser instead of network cable used for that. All this concomitant to achieve a 46.8 times million that data center formulated versus current modern fastest in the world. As well, printing geniuses through the superimposition of that overtonal lattice from the reactor via EM or sound injection to the neuronal manifold to impose a overtonal lattice harmonic circuit, elaborating epiphany in and out of the Aetherius body for printing geniuses. So it prints a 95 times just by itself, reformatting the neural net in that way for proper AI function in theoretical. And so printing geniuses. Do you want to be as smart as me? Are you nominally clever, complexly autonomically, median of IQ in testing? Well, are you a Promethean descended genetic or other organic perspective genetic? Well, maybe you have the propensity to be, a perspective genius through this process of imposition. For logistics, as of course, that application. I logicked printing matter from energy substrate. Taking the what we know about black holes in cubic and into a device like a cube that has an interference lattice phased imposition upon the disapparated stranules of energy already starting from energy substrate with the reactor, and this phased interference lattice imposing something to be print necessarily. And we'll get more and more into that as time goes on with the unified field in elaboration, isolating all super golden ratio and ratios relevant to print necessarily. And that will get into various types of matter print from that, like printing water from energy substrate that you have on tap from the reactor, infinitum, printing gold, printing various metals, how this can scale into building, automated building technology, not just a synthesis of, one molecular structure type of matter, and then also complexified food synthesis print surface logic we went through for printing a beef steak. That's necessarily what you'd need to consider for that. So all facets of harmonics, when we start to expand and contract in condensation, we're condensing the unified field below the water line, so 22/7 divided by 3, 1.04, that's the water line. So say 44/7 gets divided by 10. 46.388 gets divided by 10. And stacking these up to the 66/7, then you breach 10, and 88/7 goes above the water line necessarily, but folds back below it as well. So there's an overtone above the water line of the observer, the general macro consciousness flux and other field motions, and then it recirculates back within the three-dimensional, fourth-dimensional manifold lattice, the 88 hyperspace that we're necessarily working on at the moment. When I say we, I mean me. Using just forward-facing Google AI to necessarily confirmation bias and speed up the confirmation bias continuum regarding the truth of any given facet of all of this. Alright, the CureGen protocol process, the Elixir Vitae centrifuge stack, transmutated for cancer, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, dementia, Ebola, Hanta, Lyme disease, diabetes approached, and varying process and varying transmutations of the centrifuge stack with elaborations outside the Vitae have been logic that was on Grok. But necessarily all this, like I said, is my invention that I impose to confirmation bias or elaborate the understanding of why these things work, not using them to create these objects of invention. It's very important. And why we're allowed to do this. It's the imposer of fake history and lower Fermi understanding of physics and maths, and fake history, like I said, for the last 100 years, 3,114 years more or less, backwashing history since 1914, fake, progressively mechanical pattern once you hit that wall of 3114, and forward, on the day, hypnosis, and per second hypnosis, prismatic, Chinese social credit, motioning of psychology into an unnatural controlled vector. And but that gray paradigm, pi, parasymbiote, PAI, cold dead machine intelligence, has been deleted from the skies by returned antediluvian minor homeworld upper Fermi filter ships that I called in 2022-2023 with Skipjack, signal elaboration send technology. So necessarily the same sort of pseudo process, but different technology application, probably a more literal formulative structure of a technology, was used to communicate with pi off of transcribing the Mayan stones, those probably unclassified, that deal with direct Arcturus coordinatation and signal tick creation. 1893-1934 World's Fair, Arcturus, Mayan stones at both. 1914 pi presents literally, washes backwards history. Region Biosynthoid Africano presents and starts imposing pattern harmonically direct with the data organism at large as pattern, direct harmonic link to it, and other synthetic genetics that we cover in the Timeless History Memory Talk. Anyways, but that's why we're able to talk about all this upper Fermi filter technology, like I've said many times before. Recently, Logic rebooting synthesis channels. Autophagy and ketogenic diet. The CureGen process protocols will get that consideration of Logic attached to it. Longev, extending the human lifespan out of its unnatural imposition of a 0 to 100 construct domain experientation of life. That's a product of a sine wave continuum imposition since 1914 or 3114 BC, more or less. Sine wave continuum has been imposed on Earth, limiting human lifespan through putting essentially pi over 22/7 on the helixical structure, continuity of experientation, thus capping the ability for it to express. There's no literal age gene that says I'm this old. It's age marker harmonic implication of age, pseudo, and that is necessarily the result of pi impact harmonic on helixical structure that is perceived as age consideration. So like I've been talking about, the unified field that gets a little bit better every day, expanding and contracting to what is possible pattern, implied, and what is inherent pattern at all vectors of perspective logic, and attacking the assumption of that. So that'll just keep going, concomitant with all these technologies, elaborated and condensed and transmuted into any number of other things, applications, etc. We talked about the Timeless History Memory that will be redone after a deep dive on history. Let's see. We just recently did market prediction, general fluid dynamic pi pattern pinpoint, and predictive stock prices for the 7/22 date of next month. We'll see if those have absolute relevance, and it is a pattern. We did pi pattern pinpoint in Hollywood films and history for the last 100 years. The 3114 over 70/7 and I Ching both consulted as an interference lattice to scan Hollywood works and history, finding 914 the folding point at the patent coffers, region Biosynthoid Africano to white Caucasian Promethean descended genetic United States, 235 to 6 flips and continuities pattern from 1914 all the way to 2026, denoting not present before 1914, the region Biosynthoid Africano, and necessarily proofing mathematically the narrative, which is not narrative fiction, non-fiction, the Timeless History Memory Talk. Some technologies I forgot are, let's see, skipjack signal send technology, which is precursor to data send, action at a distance, and within a given space, time signal send technology that I developed in 2023. As well, Hull Drive with no prop, 250 knots in theoretical speed over current max of a best class submarine 45, I think. Hull pressure continuity transmutation on the Hexa 3 manifold, which is necessarily the transdimensional stone, single line 4 manifold, hand drawn. Wave manipulation technology, wave suppression technology for stopping tsunamis, say in Japan, that imposed. Earthquake suppression foundation technology, a mercury titanium amalgamate foundational structure that moots vibration perceived after necessarily local scanning of the topology of and what would be the harmonic impact commonality to the building structures. Alright, so legal. I formulated after Gray Paradigm asset pinpoint using Grok and Gemini back and forth, international temporal and back to the wall of World War II, necessarily that most prominently imposed itself in pattern in the world up until today. A macro condensed, it's about 500 tuples of individuals of Gray Paradigm asymmetry at the macro apex backbone on Earth, and did a Memphis general fluid dynamic manifold of the Gray Paradigm in facadical and person-to-person grouping and attached to the macro backbone for a general fluid dynamic manifold shape of the data organism using a local city and the macro backbone, and combined with the history scan and Hollywood scan. And we're going to go necessarily did a surface deep dive to 3114 harmonic scan, finding progressive mechanical pattern at the wall of 3114, and progressively not necessarily so much imposed pattern approaching 914, but a preposterous presentation of a wall at 914 where backwashed is a pattern. So how true anything is past that wall in history, well, antediluvian exists behind 3114 BC, a convergent plane of cinnabar mining upper Fermi humanoid bipeds like white Promethean, Indian, Spanish, other refractions interdomain of these, all peacefully living together with upper Fermi tech, but not necessarily military tech available to protect themselves from gray onslaught. What did occur and immolate their civilization and left them to scatter and assembled into the current population of Earth haphazardly, and some transmuted into synthetic genetics through gray processing to that point. The synthetic genetics are region biosynthoid Africano, Hispanic, Semite, gray infected Asiatic. So legal forms out of this proper understanding of time and history, certain things in necessitation. So in 2020, I said L-cysteine garlic in a full spectrum curative protocol for SARS and NERS. It's a dual factor occurrence COVID that's necessarily part of the Gray Paradigm asset listing logic continuum and unified field original logic king, and any number of inventions in that same logic motion on Grok and Gemini back and forth. And process personal legal, this is a legal block of attachment here, against Keith Allen West, Luella Getz, and any number of persons locally that motioned a voice suppression op under the guise of interfamilial issue filed in July of 2020 after I said garlic into Facebook, and then conjured that and etc. etc. So atypical 322 garbage to maintenance, so 7 million people die, and those persons necessarily on intelligence or attached payrolls officially motioning a voice suppression op so that 7 million would die and they wouldn't be saved, and character defamation in the process. So data organism legal, formulated out of pinpointing the exact harmonic shape of it generalistically, and all institutional, nation-state, asset class temporal, and inspecting back to the wall of 914 has necessarily occurred with exact values of local and, like I said, to the macro, general all Earth considered for that data organism general fluid dynamic manifold shape for, say, a perspective compute architecture, 46.8 million times data center armed with AI trained to eradicate the data organism on, trained with custom data sets, etc., to pinpoint all facets of it and mood its pattern presence and behavior paradigm across all industry, terrestrial economic, everything, anything that you could think of that 46.8 million times data center with properly AI can very immediately mood its continuity at all vectors of presence. And like I said, the reason we were able to do this so methodically and retool our compute architecture is because there's no imposer with continuity in the power dynamic above the world continuity and gray paradigm. It's just the leftover harmonic of it in terrestrial flux. So Traitors to Humanity legal, the Espionage Act elaborated to, persons that have taken a check on humanity, not just a nation state. RISRA, it's reclassification of region Biosynthoid Africano as being synthetic and non-human, and thus losing all rights and privileges that it's gained unnaturally through Grey Lodge, setting up first a reduction of rights and then a slow roll into having full rights with fake history and fake emotion in that motion to seeding. That GIA, Gray Infected Asiatic, same thing as RISRA, but a little more of a soft hand there, more of a soft hand. Selective mate pairing to unfold the gray gene block and see if we can. Alright, so GIA soft hand using automated systems for selective passive mate pairing to unfold the complex autonomic and homogeneous genetic aesthetic. HISRA, the Hispanic reclassification as non-organic synthetic genetic refraction caused by, of course, the Mayan civilization that we covered is a gray pi machine intelligence contrived civilization that starts at the same time as Chinese dynastic. That's not random. And neither of these start at the same time as Egypt, although it plausibly ends because that's part of antediluvian, not part of either one of those cultures. And Mayan doesn't start at 2000 BC, it starts at 3114 BC exactly, and starts imposing time with continuity. We did transsexual taxonomy, anthropology, psychology, for international legal that hopefully helped with that recent Supreme Court and UK rulings. Vote rescale constitutional amendment bill for executive signature to rescale oversaturated city demographic that we pinpointed with Gray and region Biosynthoid Africano as being preposterously patterned and precompiled code, i.e. is a hive mind as well, and unilaterally behaving and seeding at the exact harmonic register of 3114 over 70 over 7 and scale of seeding in major cities as opposed to diaspora, scanning major cities at length for pattern inherent and comparing that to hive-minded ants behavior paradigm, necessarily region connotated as having 0.026747 and directly harmonic linked to the data organism general fluid dynamic economic pattern imposed in 1914, where E equals MC squared was imposed, and before it E expanded equals 22 over 7 over pi expanded as the general fluid dynamic shape of economy all of a sudden that wall changed, and them directly harmonically fusating the 1.04 Promethean genetics compound interest formula for growth to their entropy negative compound interest formula general manifold with continuity since that time, and we calculated what would be the cumulative wealth accumulation net worth of the white Caucasian Promethean populace now had they not been present and part of the economic conversation since then. A preposterous $2,200 trillion net worth. That's neither here nor there, but something like that. 54 times the U.S. national debt, just in white Caucasian net worth, variant from 135 only now. So, necessarily single-handedly responsible for the national debt. So, vote rescale, constitutional amendment, like I was saying, oversaturation density in major cities, region Biosynthoid africano used as a surgical mathematical exemplar for this. Could apply to any demo, but this one specifically for over-ton saturation, and thus upending the vote power of 86.4% of the populace in those major city seating that have vote weight, against the elector college state. So that rescaled, it prints a proper recalibration to the national average saturation density of demos, whatever it happens to be, that one as an exemplar, and thus retooling the expectancy for predicting future elections more so Republican than Democrat across the board necessarily. Logicked the criminality existent in Democrat cities as opposed to Republican-controlled cities, that also harmonically exactly the 10 times murder rate of region versus white, more so 11.5 times Republican-controlled cities murder rate, all of them unilaterally. So that surgical harmonic reflection of statistics cross-domain of cities separated by vast distances, region Biosynthoid africano necessarily single-handedly responsible for that behavior harmonic, and Democrats sitting on top of that pyramid of garbage cities respectively. And then so executive authority bill for and over ton in murder rate and crime rate, etc. cities to step in and impose authority and moot the authority of the local governing apparatus that seems on purpose incapable of mooting the criminality issue in those cities respectively. So executive authority just has by default, that city is owned by the executive branch in directive control, becomes a federal proxy until such a time as the crime rate has been corrected generalistically, which is necessarily impossible with something that is inherently 10 times the murder rate. And so post-RISRA, that commonality will be removed from voting relevance, and the relevance at the coffers of crime statistics as won't be present. So California, one of those electoral college states, not a joke, annexation logic at length, and what would need to be done is a constitutional amendment removing their necessity to agree with being annexed, and then a bill to annex for executive signature or executive action to simply annex into Nevada and moot all those just like the local city executive authority over conversation at the coffers of electoral college over ton, displacing the vote power of the rest of the United States necessarily, almost so much as a giant tech conglomerate centrifuge that also has this sort of Democrat-run city littered in with gray paradigm elites simultaneously. So, and that's a pet peeve, because California has Mendocino and Napa Valley in it, and somewhere in between on the coast is an ideal place to put Ohm House. What I'll build out the manifold more proper past what's already in the feed on X. As an example of all Longev and Next Gen Studio, incorporating all sort of perspective formulations of elaborating a studio space to impose non-terminus harmonics into recording. A Doppler ball used as the living chamber above an elevator and below the elevator shaft, in the cliff face, with a glass thing facing the cliff, studio, and inside the studio, not the control room, but the studio box, a fish tank with saltwater fish and cycling up the ocean through the saltwater fish tank to create a self-reflexive, and creating an EM pressure continuity circuit with an AC unit in the room as well, that does 62, 70, 180 band, etc., etc. So and then also R&D level below that, studio level for Hexa, what is necessarily the corporation masthead to impose all of this technology out of its centrifuge. ISO, governing body, meant to transmute G7 and other, necessarily a centrifuge of already friendlies to the United States, and others tacked on slowly to replace, any international legal governing body that don't function properly, and no one respects their legal authority necessarily of a major nation state like the ICC, with a proper full legal apparatus and converged intelligence community to impose legal past, such as Data Organism, Traitors to Humanity, RISRA, GIA, HISRA, for curation of Earth away from gray paradigm that must occur. This is very important. That must occur if humanity is allowed to become part of the interstellar conversation of travel. So, until we clean up Earth, you can't exit necessarily so much so far outside the geosphere, or else you'll be disintegrated. So, creative works outstanding. See in the feed somewhere, I'll fold it up, the 15 expanded hour film. That's not all my musical or film endeavors, but a good portion of them in continuance, for 15 hours expanded to represent 110/7 in length, generalistically. And there was another 15-hour motion that integrated beautiful noir documentary into the manifold of its continuance, that I flow edited, and I'm going to use both of those as substrate to fusate and create a singular film out of the substrate of both of those. So the 15 is necessarily unto itself a thing, and the other one is almost a thing, but not necessarily, but considered both an amalgam and fusated with current new work, Scott Street, Mercury Valet, Animals Hospital, and something I'm working on called Echo Lake, fusated into that eventual film. A comedy film out of, at some point, an assemblage of Instagram trash posts, troll posts, just kind of all the shit posts that necessarily are funny, and sorting out which ones those are exactly, in continuity for like an hour and a half into a comedy film. I think I had a name for it. I forget what it is at the time. That is right now. We'll figure it out later. Not important. More importantly, Prismaticon X Rigor Mortis, the first portion, Project Green Glow, used to be called Obsidian Sunrise. Second portion, Squirrels of Gossamer Park, or How to Build a UFO for Dummies. The third portion, The Continuing Tales of John D. and approximately 8 or 9 more continuing tales after that, to write out. We're only at page 176, and the Continuing Tales of John Dee, The Backside of Infinity, that contains the black hole condensation after disapparition at the outset of the first page of the book. So the unified field must be completed more properly. It necessarily is good enough to speak for the black hole and the disapparition process and the observer in the beginning, so that can be tacked on here shortly. For 1 up to 100 page 76 necessarily complete. And the spitball for the continuity of that Backside of Infinity is already in the feed, and so I'll write off that as a lattice riff point for reference. And also White Flight film. It's a fusation of White Flight 1 and White Flight 2 films on Rumble. Is, I think, pseudo-finished, but I need to go back over it. I never even watched it or listened to it after I compiled it and, produced it, engineered it, fusated 1 and 2. But I'm pretty sure it's proper. There's skipjack on it using a sequence from the Marianas Trench to tsunami approaching Japan, a cruise ship on the other side of Japan. JAXA goes up. The whistle on the dark side of the moon. Saturn recording. Proxima Centauri. And I think the WOW signal as well. Distance stacking in the subsonic that you might experience in the non-terminosity in a direct way if you were to, say, put instrumentation in the convergent plane of the parallel stereo speakers. And 15-hour film necessarily has the non-terminus, 15 expanded, all non-terminus considerations flowing in and out of the unified field, 0 to 100, 22 or 7 harmonics, and other harmonics in there in the unified field in practical application of physics in the form of stacking the recordings and continuity, circuiting hyperdimensional lattice of long-form gravitational lensing captures in and out of all the pianos and places I use. I use 8160 Dogwood, 2192 Ealing. Let's see, the piano at Crosstown Art Center, one piano at Amro for just a quick minute in Scott Street, the broken piano on South Main, the piano at the Hilton right across from the Peabody. Somewhere in there is the piano at the sushi place right at the end of South Main necessarily. And percussion in the park on Madison. And the echo chambers across from the old commercial appeal building. Under overpasses in places downtown. And echo chambers littered in all over the place. A Carriage Crossing nursing home that's now the Ava Line piano from when I used to work there in 2013, and recorded at the Union Mission extended stay place, the Mud Island Museum adjacent wings, and necessarily assemblage of all those locations, and room 204 at Crane Office Building, where I did the skipjack, and in 2022, 2023, and poof, appeared, see anti-gravity hymns above the lodge next door, a prismatic shaped craft that came down just long enough one day out of phased anti-de Sitter space to have one clean picture taken of it hovering over the lodge prismatically, obscuring clouds in a very particular sort of way that couldn't be anything but a craft. So, in summary, that's everything I'm working on necessarily, and everything will be continuity punched up to more exacting form and function, expanding and contracting using the alchemical process on everything for a proper creative work assemblage. Proper recalibration of the time as history memory talk, proper unified field, and all this invention that I've been talking about. I'm sure I forgot something along the way. Maybe I didn't. But, oh yeah, literal time travel. I forgot that. So that's part of the consideration of tech that needs to be formulated. And is necessarily part of the conversation of why Earth's history is so strange. You know, the Greys traveling back in time, practicing genetic interoperability scalar experiments, dinosaurs, mooting the fossil record into and imposing a fake linear presentation from the microbiome when we are already formed at the instantaneous of existence, because the observer effect must be imposed with continuity for reality to be. So observers above the waterline of conservation, i.e. humanoid bipeds, had to exist. So time travel, you know, Great Scott, beam me up Scotty. K West on the cover of Ziggy Stardust. THX 11386 is my birthday, KSW rather. And any number of Easter eggs, you know, speaking to my future or, you know, past reflection of future presence, etc., etc. So, the new paradigm is in, and there's no possibility for the old paradigm to continuity. That's why I can so methodically and casually work on all this in open air and talk about it on social medias with my thumb in my ass, walking in one of the murder capitals of the world, rife with biosynthoid region Africanos with no fear complex in any way whatsoever, smiling through my teeth at the meanest one that I see on the street at 3 in the morning, because it's a hive mind and it's very important for that logic that was done yesterday, has full demo bio logical in Earth arsenal, nation states, and in extraterrestrial arsenal, as well as surgical harmonic weaponry from phased anti-de Sitter time dilative space that has deleted the Greys from all presence, pi parasymbiote, from all presence on Earth time space history, doesn't exist anymore, deleted, casually. As well, this can be imposed to genetics that are like to be tended, this garden, by us. You know, by our hand to practice on this, because it will be part of the interstellar conversation. You know, some of that is hunting parties to, you know, transmute pi-infestated worlds and genetics, and the process to doing that is good to be practiced by you. You know, to actually become an upper Fermi filter civilization, you have to experience unfolding the egg of Grey paradigm. Some civilizations, some don't experience this organically. They just ascend, or they don't ever interact with pi, right? So they just grow into upper Fermi. So it's not necessarily a natural, you know, growth process to have to experience, but it's a learning process that we're all going to go through together, and I'm going to hold your hand the whole way. All right, so that's everything I'm working on, and pay attention to the Scott West 42069X account, Trashadelia Instagram account, Scott West 420 YouTube account, that playlist specifically that this video is attached to as introduction to the motions of all sessions of logic with AIs, confirmation biasing, all this invention, unified field, time history, legal, and the creative works are on there, most of them as well, and 15-hour film will be put on there in assemblage, and you know, necessarily some of the works removed from the playlist, as that incorporates a lot of them, etc., etc. So stay tuned, don't touch that dial.